Welcome to another episode of Daily Musings from Sacred Ground. When we think of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we of course think of him as a civil rights leader. We may conceive of him as a peace or social justice advocate. Behind that, we can think of him as a Baptist minister, as a Christian pastor. We probably don't think of him usually as a mystic. And I don't know that he ever characterized himself in those terms, but there were certain transformative moments in his life, including one evening at midnight in his kitchen, that have a certain mystical element to them. He sometimes shared about them, even in his sermons. And today I'd like to read from one of those sermons where he talks about this midnight experience in the kitchen. You can find this in his book, Strength to Love, or in his other collection of writings called A Testament of Hope. One little note is, like all of us, Dr. King was a person of his time. So near the end of this reading, he speaks of men, where we would probably speak of men and women. So just throw that out. But I'm going to read the last few paragraphs from this sermon to you today from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. After a particularly strenuous day, I settled to bed at a late hour. My wife had already fallen asleep, and I was about to doze off when the telephone rang. An angry voice said, "Listen, Ann, we've taken all we want from you. Before next week, you'll be sorry you ever came to Montgomery." I hung up, but I could not sleep. It seemed that all of my fears had come down on me at once. I had reached the saturation point. I got out of bed and began to walk the floor. Finally, I went to the kitchen and heated a pot of coffee. I was ready to give up. I tried to think of a way to move out of the picture without appearing to be a coward. In this state of exhaustion, when my courage had almost gone, I determined to take my problem to God. My head in my hands, I bowed over the kitchen table and prayed aloud. The words I spoke to God that midnight are still vivid in my memory. I am here taking a stand for what I believe is right. But now I am afraid. The people are looking to me for leadership, and if I stand before them without strength and courage, they too will falter. I'm at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone. At that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine, as I had never before experienced him. It seemed as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, "Stand up for righteousness. Stand up for truth. God will be at your side forever." Almost at once, my fears began to pass from me. My uncertainty disappeared. I was ready to face anything. The outer situation remained the same, but God had given me inner calm. 3 nights later, our home was bombed. Strangely enough, I accepted the word of the bombing calmly. My experience with God had given me a new strength and trust. I knew now that God is able to give. I knew now that God is able to give us the interior resources to face the storms and problems of life. Let this affirmation be our ringing cry. It will give us courage to face the uncertainties of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride toward the city of freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds, and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a great benign power in the universe whose name is God. And He is able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. This is our hope for becoming better men. This is our mandate for seeking to make a better world. The words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm Michael Malley, and you've been listening to Daily Musings from Sacred Ground.